Rain streaked the glass of the high-rise apartment, turning the city below into a blur of gold and gray. Lily stumbled through the dimly lit hallway, her heels clacking unevenly against the polished floor. She laughed softly at something she didn't remember saying, the sound trembling between amusement and despair. Her wine glass tilted precariously in her hand, spilling crimson drops over the pale carpet. A shadow waited by the door, a man in a crisp black suit, hair slicked back, expression unreadable. Michael's eyes traced her every move, calm but alert, as if he had known this night would come long before she did. She didn't notice him at first, too wrapped up in her own storm of thoughts, until she tripped over the edge of the rug, a soft gasp escaping her lips. He reached out, catching her wrist with a gentleness that surprised her. "Careful," he whispered, his voice low, steady, almost magnetic. The city hummed outside, thunder rolling in the distance, yet in that apartment, the world narrowed down to two heartbeats, one trembling and one restrained. Lily's gaze met his, blurry from tears and wine, and for a moment, the anger she had rehearsed all week melted into confusion. "Before we dive deeper, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? It amazes me how far a single story can travel. Drop your city, let's see how wide kindness still spreads." Lily sank onto the edge of the sofa, still holding her glass like a lifeline. Michael perched on the armrest, careful not to crowd her space, yet close enough to radiate a presence she couldn't ignore. "You shouldn't have come," she murmured, voice cracking, though a part of her was secretly relieved. "I know," he said, tilting his head, eyes scanning her flushed face. "But I couldn't stay away." The tension in the room was palpable. Outside, the rain struck the windows harder, each droplet a heartbeat in the silence. Lily finally set her glass on the table, leaving a dark red stain like a scar on the polished wood. "You never understand," she whispered, pulling her knees to her chest. "I want to," Michael replied. His hand hovered over hers for a moment, an unspoken question hanging in the air. She flinched, but didn't pull away this time. Hours earlier, her evening had been a blur of blurred memories and reckless laughter at a friend's party, the city lights dizzying in their brilliance. She had been angry, at the world, at herself, at him. Each sip of wine had loosened words she regretted before they left her lips. Each careless gesture carved deeper into the fragile thread of her composure. Michael hadn't expected this confrontation tonight, he hadn't even planned to see her. Yet here he was, drawn by something he couldn't name, something beyond anger or frustration, a silent pull toward the woman who challenged him in ways no one else ever had. Lily leaned back, letting the sofa swallow her as tears began to slip freely, hot and insistent. "I don't even know why I'm saying any of this," she admitted, voice barely audible over the rain. Michael didn't answer immediately. He simply observed, absorbing every tremble, every flutter of her lashes, every hesitation in her posture. "Maybe because you trust me, more than you think," he finally said, a whisper that seemed to ripple through the quiet room. His words weren't a reprimand, they were a thread of understanding, one she hadn't realized she'd been craving. She shivered at the sound, the weight of it pressing gently against the walls she had built. He reached over, brushing a strand of damp hair from her face. "Lily, whatever it is, we'll face it. Together." His tone was unwavering, patient, almost impossibly steady. She closed her eyes, letting the warmth seep in, yet a flicker of defiance remained. Memories of earlier encounters played behind her eyelids, the fights that left both of them wounded, the moments of tenderness that seemed almost accidental, and the secrets each held like fragile glass, too sharp to touch yet too beautiful to discard. Her heart thudded in her chest, a painful rhythm of longing and fear. Lily's phone buzzed on the table. She ignored it, letting the silence stretch. Michael didn't push. He simply waited, a quiet presence amidst the chaos of her emotions. Slowly, she unclenched her fists, her shoulders sagging under the weight of exhaustion and something heavier, hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in months. The rain outside softened, the thunder retreating like a tide, leaving the city wet but quiet. She finally looked at him, really looked, searching his eyes for any hint of judgment. There was none. Only something deeper, a recognition of the complexity they shared, the battles fought silently between them, and the fragile bridge of trust that had begun to form. "Do you think," she started, voice trembling, "that people can really change?" Michael's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "I don't know," he said softly. "But I believe they can try. That counts for something." For the first time that night, Lily allowed herself a small, shaky laugh. It wasn't joy, not yet, but it was acknowledgement, a flicker of light in the dim room, a thread connecting their fractured moments. "If you were there in that moment, what would you have done? Be honest, comment your answer below. And if words fail you, just hit like to prove that compassion still matters." Outside, the city continued to pulse, indifferent yet alive. Inside, two people sat amid the scattered shadows of the past, caught between anger and understanding, yet closer than they had been in years. Lily's laugh faded into a quiet sigh, the sound almost swallowed by the room's dim light. She stared at her hands, tracing invisible patterns across her palms as though she could map the chaos inside her. Michael remained still, his gaze unwavering, giving her space without ever letting go completely. There was something in his presence that grounded her, a silent promise that no matter how messy she became, he wouldn't leave. The clock ticked softly on the wall, each second stretching the tension between them into something almost tangible. Lily's mind drifted back to the night before, to the sharp sting of her father's disappointment and the bitter words that followed. They had erupted over something trivial, a missed dinner, a forgotten promise, but the resentment underneath was deep, layered with years of unspoken expectations and silent judgments. She had run from that weight into the night, into the warm numbness of wine, and ultimately, into Michael. "You know," she whispered, almost to herself, "I think I was trying to prove something, to everyone but me." Her voice cracked on the last word, raw and exposed. Michael shifted slightly, leaning forward just enough to catch the tremor in her tone. "You don't have to prove anything," he said quietly. "Not to me. Not to anyone." The words were gentle but firm, like a lifeline thrown across the stormy sea she'd been navigating alone. She wanted to argue, to tell him he didn't understand, but a part of her knew he did. And that scared her. She turned her gaze to the window, watching the rain smear the neon lights of the city into watery streaks. "It's just, everything piles up," she said, voice low. "I keep thinking I can hold it all together, but sometimes I break, and then I'm just me. And maybe me isn't enough." Michael's hand found hers again, this time deliberate, firm, anchoring her in a way words couldn't. "Lily," he murmured, voice gentle, "you're more than enough. And if you ever forget, I'll remind you. Over and over, if I have to." Her breath hitched. She wanted to push away, to maintain the fragile barrier she'd built, but the exhaustion of pretending, of holding herself together for everyone else, was too heavy. She let herself lean slightly toward him, a quiet surrender that wasn't about defeat, it was about trust. For a moment, they sat in silence, the only sound the soft dripping of rain from the eaves outside. Then, almost imperceptibly, Michael squeezed her hand. "You've been carrying all of this alone for too long," he said softly. "But maybe you don't have to anymore." Lily's eyes filled with tears she hadn't known were there. She swallowed hard, the taste of wine and salt mingling on her lips. "I don't know if I can, if I'm ready," she admitted, voice breaking. "You don't have to be," he replied. "You just have to start." The words were simple, almost fragile, yet they struck her like a bell in the quiet room. She closed her eyes, letting herself feel the weight of everything, the anger, the fear, the exhaustion, and for the first time in months, allowed herself to release it, just a little. Her shoulders sagged, a subtle but profound relief washing over her. Her phone buzzed again, ignored, the outside world momentarily irrelevant. What mattered was this fragile moment of connection, this tiny spark of understanding in the midst of a storm. Michael's gaze softened. "Lily, have you ever let someone just see you? Really see you, without judgment?" She hesitated, a small, bitter laugh escaping her. I think, maybe once. But it didn't last. Then maybe it's time someone did, he whispered, leaning just close enough for her to feel the warmth of his presence. She didn't pull away. Outside, the city continued its indifferent rhythm, but inside that apartment, the storm had shifted. The lightning still cracked across the sky, the thunder still rolled in the distance, yet between them, a fragile calm had settled, like the pause between heartbeats when the world seems to hold its breath. Lily lifted her gaze to him, eyes glistening. It's scary, she admitted, barely above a whisper. It's supposed to be, he said. If it wasn't scary, it wouldn't matter. A memory flickered unbidden, a random stranger helping her up when she had slipped months ago on a wet street, no words exchanged, just a quiet gesture of care. She thought of the ripple of that small kindness, how it had lingered longer than she expected. If you were there in that moment, what would you have done? Be honest, comment your answer below. And if words fail you, just hit like to prove that compassion still matters. Her lips quivered, and she realized something she hadn't dared to before, that maybe letting someone in, even slightly, could be the beginning of something real. The thought terrified her and thrilled her all at once. Michael noticed the change, subtle but undeniable, a shift in posture, in the way her hands unclenched, in the faint spark of acknowledgement in her eyes. I've been so scared of everything, she said, voice barely audible. Of failing, of being hurt, of not being enough. Michael's hand tightened around hers, a quiet anchor. Scared is human, he said. But so is hope. And you have that too. She nodded slowly, a fragile smile threatening the edges of her lips. The tension in the room eased slightly, replaced by the tentative promise of something fragile, something worth tending. It wasn't resolution, not yet, but it was enough to take a breath, enough to recognize that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to face the storm alone. The rain had softened into a persistent drizzle now, tapping gently against the window like a quiet percussion to their lingering silence. Lily leaned back against the sofa, letting Michael's presence settle around her like a warm coat. Her mind wandered, drifting into memories she had carefully tucked away, scenes that hurt but also shaped the person she had become. She remembered the small apartment she had grown up in, the peeling wallpaper and the faint smell of coffee and old books. Her father had been a man of routines, strict and meticulous, his love wrapped in expectation rather than warmth. She had always tried to be the perfect daughter, top grades, polite responses, measured smiles. But no matter how much she achieved, it never seemed enough. The nights of silent tears in her room, the whispered prayers for validation, the frustration that bubbled like an underground river, all of it had built her walls higher than she realized. And then there was her mother, distant yet quietly observing, her own burdens reflected in subtle lines of worry etched across her face. Lily had loved her mother fiercely but had never been able to bridge the gap between them. Every attempt at connection seemed to vanish in the air like smoke, leaving Lily more isolated than before. Her friends had come and gone, fleeting comfort that never lasted beyond the school gates. Michael's voice broke through her reverie. You carry so much, Lily, he said softly, his hand still wrapped around hers. But you don't have to carry it alone anymore. She swallowed hard, staring at him as if trying to read his thoughts. I don't know if I even know how to let someone in, she admitted, voice trembling. I've spent so long hiding, pretending. I don't even recognize myself sometimes. You're not hiding anymore, he whispered. You're just cautious. That's not weakness, it's survival. Her mind drifted back again, to a time when she had been 13, standing in the rain outside a corner store, tears blending with the drizzle as she realized she had lost her last friend to a misunderstanding she couldn't undo. A stranger had approached her then, offering a hand and a quiet, "It's going to be okay." Nothing more. No lectures, no judgment, just kindness. That moment had lingered in her memory, proof that someone could care without strings attached. It had been fleeting, but it had mattered. Have you ever had someone help you when no one else would? Right, yes, and tell me their name, maybe gratitude can travel further than we think. She blinked rapidly, startled by the memory, by the ache it carried, and by the sudden awareness that Michael had quietly been filling a similar space in her present. The thought both frightened and comforted her. She wasn't used to someone showing patience, letting her unfold at her own pace. Most people either ran or tried to fix her, neither of which felt safe. But Michael, he simply existed in her orbit, steady and unshakable. The wine she had abandoned on the table earlier had begun to evaporate, leaving only the faint scent lingering in the air. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, her gaze distant. "I've been angry at everyone," she confessed softly. "Not just you, but my parents, my friends, even myself." Michael's thumb brushed lightly over the back of her hand. "Anger is human," he said. "It's what you do with it that matters." Her chest tightened as she considered his words. She wanted to believe them, desperately, yet the years of conditioning and disappointment pressed down on her like a weight. But looking at Michael now, seeing the unwavering patience in his eyes, a spark of something fragile, hope, ignited. She remembered the nights she had cried herself to sleep, clutching a pillow and whispering apologies into the darkness for mistakes she hadn't even fully understood. Those whispers had never been heard, never comforted. And yet, somehow, this man in the quiet apartment was listening now, not just hearing, but truly hearing. A sudden lightning flash illuminated the room briefly, revealing the vulnerability etched into both of their faces. Lily's hands trembled slightly, and Michael's gaze softened further. "You deserve to be heard," he said quietly. "Not just tolerated. Not just seen for the surface. Really heard." Her lips quivered, and she pressed her hand over her mouth to stifle a sob. I've never felt that way before," she admitted. "And now you do," he whispered. "That's what matters." The city outside hummed a quiet, indifferent rhythm, but inside the apartment, a fragile bridge had begun to form over the chasm of her past. Lily leaned back again, exhaling slowly, feeling the tension in her shoulders ease slightly for the first time in years. Memories of pain, loneliness, and fleeting kindnesses came together in a tangled web that had shaped her entirely, yet the presence of someone willing to witness it without judgment was opening a new possibility, a chance to heal, to trust, to feel. For the first time that night, she allowed herself to imagine a life where mistakes weren't permanent, where anger could be tempered with understanding, and where kindness could be the balm for wounds long neglected. Michael remained close, silent, letting her navigate the tempest of her memories without interference, offering only the quiet assurance of his presence. The rain had finally tapered off outside, leaving the streets slick and glistening under the city lights. Lily and Michael sat in the dim apartment, the silence between them carrying the weight of unsaid words. Her hand still trembled slightly, but the tremor now felt less like fear and more like anticipation. She couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him, a force both frightening and irresistible. Michael leaned back, watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "You've been running from something," he said softly, "but I don't think you're running anymore." "Not completely." She looked down, the confession stuck in her throat. "I've spent so much of my life pretending I'm fine, that I don't feel anything. And then I drink or laugh too loud to drown it out. But it's still there. Always there." His voice lowered, almost a whisper, yet it carried across the room with weight. "I see it, Lily. I see everything you try to hide. And you don't have to anymore." A flash of lightning outside illuminated the room, followed by the low rumble of thunder, echoing the storm that still simmered in her chest. She swallowed hard, finally daring to meet his eyes. "And what if I fail?" she asked, voice barely audible. "Then I'll still be here," he replied firmly. "Not judging. Not walking away. Just here." Lily's breath hitched. The thought of vulnerability, of opening herself fully, terrified her. But the warmth in his presence, the quiet assurance in his tone, made her consider something she hadn't in a long time: trust. Maybe trust wasn't about guarantees. Maybe it was about daring to lean on someone anyway. Her mind drifted back to earlier mistakes, arguments that had spiraled into days of silence, opportunities to connect lost to pride and stubbornness. Each memory carried a sting, yet they also reminded her that even in failure, moments of grace could exist. Michael's presence now felt like that grace. He shifted closer, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. "Lily," he murmured, "we're not perfect. Neither of us. But maybe that's the point. Maybe real connection comes from showing up, flaws and all." Her eyes filled, and for the first time that night, she allowed herself to consider the possibility of letting someone in. Her fingers tightened slightly around his hand, a silent acknowledgement of the fragile trust she was extending. I want to believe that," she admitted, voice trembling. "But it's hard." "I know," he said softly. "I know it's hard. And you don't have to do it all at once. Small steps. One moment at a time." She let out a shaky laugh, the sound mingling relief and lingering fear. "I think I've forgotten what small steps feel like," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I've been trying to leap so far ahead that I forgot to walk." Michael's gaze softened, tender and unwavering. "Then we'll start walking together," he said. "Even if it's just a few steps tonight. Even if it feels impossible, we'll take them together." The tension in her chest eased slightly, replaced by a fragile glimmer of hope. She realized that it wasn't the grand gestures that mattered, it was these quiet moments, the shared vulnerability, the small acts of presence that slowly stitched their fractured pieces together. "I've been so scared of being hurt again," she confessed. "Of giving everything and having it crushed. But with you, maybe it feels safer than it should." Michael's thumb brushed over the back of her hand, a silent reassurance. "It's okay to be scared," he said. "Scared means you care. It means this matters." A sudden memory surged unbidden, an old friend who had once helped her in a moment of panic, a small kindness that had left a lasting mark. The thought brought a bittersweet smile to her lips, a reminder that human connection, even fleeting, had the power to change everything. "Now it's your turn, share one small good thing you did recently. Write it below so others remember that humanity still lives. Your story might light someone's path tonight." Her gaze returned to Michael, and she noticed the subtle details she had never truly seen before, the slight curve of his smile, the patience in his eyes, the quiet strength that seemed to anchor everything around him. She felt the pull of something more, a tether drawing her closer not out of obligation, but because of the unspoken bond forming between them. The room seemed to shrink, the outside world receding into insignificance. Rain-soaked streets, neon reflections, the distant hum of cars, all of it faded into the background, leaving only the fragile, pulsing connection between them. Lily's heartbeat quickened, echoing the rhythm of the storm that had once mirrored her inner turmoil. "Michael. I don't know if I can say this right," she began, voice shaking, "but I feel like I've been waiting for something. Maybe not even knowing it. And maybe it's you." His expression softened, a tender acknowledgement passing between them. "Then I'm glad you found it," he whispered. "Even if it took storms like tonight to get here." The weight in her chest began to lift, replaced by a delicate balance of vulnerability and courage. She realized that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was leaning into it, reaching out, and allowing herself to be seen despite the risk. Michael's hand found hers again, a quiet, grounding presence that reassured her without demanding anything. She let herself lean in slightly, a fragile gesture of trust, of hope, of tentative connection. Outside, the city pulsed with life, indifferent yet alive. Inside, two people sat together in the aftermath of storms, past and present, beginning to stitch together something neither had fully dared to name. The city had finally quieted. The rain had stopped completely, leaving streets glistening and silent under a silver moon. Inside the apartment, the air was thick with the weight of unsaid truths, of confessions hovering on the edge of lips. Lily's eyes searched Michael's, desperate to read the unspoken, while her own heart pounded with a mixture of fear, hope, and anticipation. "Lily," Michael's voice was low, measured, yet charged with intensity. "There's something you need to know. Something I've kept from you, not to hurt you, but to protect you." Her breath caught. "What do you mean?" she whispered, every nerve in her body alert. He hesitated, then leaned closer, the moonlight tracing the sharp angles of his face. "I'm involved in things you couldn't imagine," he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "Things that give me power, yes, but also responsibilities. Dangerous responsibilities. That's why I've always held back, kept a distance when I shouldn't have. But I couldn't stay away from you tonight. I couldn't." Lily felt her stomach drop. "Dangerous? Michael, what are you saying?" Her hands trembled slightly, clinging to his arms as if seeking something solid in the shifting reality. "I mean," he said slowly, "that I've made choices, decisions, secrets that I can't undo. And yet, despite it all, I want you to know the truth. I want you to see me, all of me. Even the parts that could hurt you." The room seemed to shrink around them, the air electric, charged with revelation. Lily's mind raced. Every memory of him, the calm in storms, the quiet patience, the warmth that had drawn her close, now shimmered with new layers of complexity. She realized that the man she thought she knew carried more than just presence, he carried burdens, power, and secrets that had defined him long before her. Her breath hitched. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he murmured. "Just, stay. Trust me." Her mind spun, yet in the depth of her chest, a strange calm settled, a willingness to accept complexity, to embrace the unknown. She reached for him, and for the first time, let herself be seen without pretense. The truth had landed, heavy yet freeing. She realized that understanding someone fully didn't require judgment. It required empathy, courage, and an openness to accept imperfections. If that moment hit you hard, leave a red heart. Sometimes one little symbol says what our hearts can't. They stayed like that for what felt like hours, the city silent, the moon tracing soft patterns across the floor. Michael's hand remained steady in hers, his presence a tether to the reality they were creating together. The world outside was dangerous, unpredictable, but inside, a fragile sanctuary existed, a place where trust, even tentative, could grow. Then Lily spoke, voice barely above a whisper, "Be honest, could you forgive after what they did?" Type "forgive" if you could, or "never" if it would break you too deeply. She didn't refer to anyone specifically, yet the words hung in the air like an echo of all past wounds. Michael smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her damp forehead. "Forgiveness isn't easy," he admitted. "But it's necessary. And yes, I think I could." Her lips quivered. She realized forgiveness wasn't about condoning mistakes, it was about releasing the weight they carried, creating space for something new. And in that moment, she chose to forgive not just him, but herself, and the past that had shaped her so profoundly. "Lily," Michael said, voice soft but urgent, "we've survived storms separately. But maybe together, we can weather them differently." Her heart throbbed with a mix of fear and exhilaration. She nodded slowly, tears spilling freely now, hot and cleansing. The tension and mistrust of months melted into a fragile acceptance. They were imperfect, complicated, human, but they had each other. If you believe love still wins, comment Amen. Let's fill this section with hope, maybe someone scrolling right now needs to see it. She leaned into him, letting the warmth of his chest envelop her, her head resting lightly against his shoulder. The apartment, with its dim lighting and lingering scent of wine and rain, felt like a cocoon. Outside, the city pulsed, alive and indifferent, but inside, hope had taken root. "Lily," he whispered, voice trembling slightly despite its usual calm, "whatever comes next. I want you by my side. Not out of obligation. Not because it's safe. But because we choose each other. Every day, if we have to." She smiled through her tears, heart swelling. "I choose you," she whispered back. And in that moment, the weight of fear, anger, and doubt lifted just enough to make room for trust, for courage, for love. If this story moved you, don't scroll past quietly. Tap like, not for me, but for the soul who carried this pain and still stayed kind. One click can be your way of saying, "I felt you." The night stretched on, quiet and tender. Michael held her close, and Lily felt the fragile, powerful truth of human connection, that even through pain, anger, and secrets, the heart could still choose hope. And as the first hints of dawn light filtered through the windows, she realized something profound, that love wasn't about perfection, but about choosing, forgiving, and trusting anyway. A lesson she would carry forward. Not just with Michael, but in every step of her life. The city outside glimmered under a new day, indifferent yet full of possibilities. Inside the apartment, two hearts, scarred and cautious, had found a rhythm together, a fragile promise that even storms could give way to light.